Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football pre-spring practice, Big Ten rankings heading into the 2024 season. Dill, this is, I think, the first thing we can say that I think all listeners can agree on before we get into stacking these teams. We might be talking about the best conference in the country heading into 2024. The boys welcoming the newcomers warmly to the Big Ten. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. It has been truly a blast taking deep dives into all these teams heading into spring practice. Cannot thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And more importantly, we're going to have some arguments. Would love to hear from you guys in the comments section how you stack these Big Ten teams heading into the 2024 season. And Dill, without further ado, let's start at the top. That first tier, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan. That's how I stack 1 through 3. Would love to get your opinion here.
I like the top two especially. I think that on paper you look, they are the most talented teams. I'm a Michigan guy. I believe in the Michigan way. But you just look, you don't really have a ton of questions about either of those teams.
Yeah.
I probably have Ohio State a little bit higher just because I mean, that defense is going to be so good in Columbus. And again, I think the one question about Ohio State is probably at the quarterback spot. Will Howard's not necessarily a guy who I think is proven to be a Heisman type player. But with that running game and with Chip Kelly and in what he's done designing schemes, I think they can run the ball really well. And if they can do that, Will Howard should be just fine. Ryan Day, really good quarterback developer. But I mean, it's tight because Oregon doesn't really have any holes either.
So my lean for Oregon is one. The more I look at this Oregon roster, the more I go back and watch in 2023. You look at the amount of talent they have coming back, the amount they've added in the transfer portal. You said it best. There's no holes in this roster. And that's why I'm giving Oregon a little bit of the nod. And quite frankly, I just trust Dylan Gabriel at the college level a little bit more than Will Howard. Now, Will Howard, I feel much better about with Chip Kelly running this offense than I did pre-Chip Kelly in Columbus. My question mark with Ohio State is if they want to run the football as much as the media is kind of pumping them up to be, what's this Ohio State offensive line going to look like? I mean, you have Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, by far the best running back room that you see in the country. You have Will Howard, who can tote the rock himself, being 252 pounds. But, Dill, my question is if you want to run the football as much as Ohio State does, do you have the offensive line to make that happen? I think we'll get some answers after spring practice. And then Michigan 3. Like, they're in this tier. They certainly can win the Big Ten. I think when you look at Oregon and Ohio State, you said it best. Not many question marks. With Michigan, you know that defense is going to be elite. You know that offensive line is going to be solid. When you have a question mark at the quarterback spot, it's hard to put Michigan over teams like Oregon and Ohio State, who are some of the best teams in all of college football.
And at the end of the day, Michigan, you're just replacing so many guys, so many, like couple really, really good linebackers in Colson and Barrett. Got a bunch of defensive linemen to replace, especially on the edge. Again, Michigan's got really good players. Mason Graham, Kenny Grant, probably the best 1-2 punch defensive interior lineman going. But you're right. It just at the end of the day, when you lose whatever they're going to lose to the draft, probably like in that 18 to 20 guy range, it's really, really hard to, again, just put them right up with Ohio State, who frankly could have lost a fair amount of guys and kind of did what Michigan did a year before and had them all come back and say, let's run it back. Let's go chase the title.
Yeah, that's how I stack the top 3. Now, I want to get your take on Penn State being a tier below in this. I went back and forth. I mean, I moved Penn State up to that top tier, down to that tier, probably over 10 times. I'm kind of in the Penn State, like I'll see it. I want to see it before I believe it mode in terms of I was really high on this Penn State team. Very similar to how I'm going to talk about USC in just a second as well. I got to see it from the offense. The dark horse here, Coach Andy Kotelnicki coming over, taking this offense, one of the offensive coordinators I have the most amount of respect for. If you can unlock Drew in that Penn State offense, you're looking at a team that can be right up there in the Big Ten, but I'm kind of sitting here and saying, all right, I got to see this offense get off the ground, and then I'm buying my stock back in Penn State.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't ignore that. That defense is going to be unbelievable. I mean, yes, I know they're going to lose some guys in the back end, a couple guys up front with Isaac and Chop, but I mean, you look at guys like Danny Dennis-Sutton, it's like they just pop out there and you don't really miss a beat. They're just as good as they were. It's just, that's a defense that's kind of built themselves into a real juggernaut. Obviously, losing Manny Diaz, like you'll have to see them replace him. But when you're that good on defense, I think, again, the coordinators should just be able to step in and run it. I think personally Penn State's probably closer to that favorites group than they are to like that next tier, if you will, because I mean, they're right there. And again, it is kind of like that Dabo Swinney question with Clemson. Like we keep seeing, oh, he brings in a new offensive coordinator. They're going to change. Something's going to change. And then nothing really changes. You still got to see it because James Franklin, like, can he remove himself from that offensive scheme and give Kolonecki the leash he needs to run it right? You'll have to see it, but they have the bones of a team that can go compete with anyone in the Big
You're
Ten.
going to see like a lot of 2 running back sets and getting the ball to Singleton and K. It's going to be a fun offense. That's a huge storyline that not a lot of people are talking about in the Big Ten, but if that Penn State offense gets going, that's a dangerous team. Dill, USC, I went back and forth with what tier I wanted to USC, and I settled on that kind of second tier. The ceiling's really high. Like when you talk about a Lincoln Riley offense, you can see them really getting after some Big Ten defenses with all that speed. You're talking about Zachariah Branch, Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon, Deuce Robinson, Miller Moss showed what he can do in the bowl game. This offense has the potential to be one of, if not the best in the Big Ten. I am optimistic about the defense, but the USC fans remember about 6 months ago heading into the 2023 season, the kid was all aboard USC, and I thought that defense was going to be revamped. I thought it was going to be really good. It wasn't. So I'm sitting here saying, all right, USC going to put them 5 in the
but like
rankings.
That's not even a fair comparison because like Alex Grinch is just the worst coordinator in the history of coordinators. Now they have Dan Lynn. I like with adding Coach Henderson from the Rams to be that run game coordinator, defensive line coach. I love what they did on the defense with that staff change. I think they got enough guys in the portal to, again, make it like it's not going to be a huge talent issue. It's not the most talented.
It's not. It never was a huge talent issue with USC. It was a coaching staff issue, and that's why I'm cautiously optimistic about USC. But again, I mean, looking back and going back and reading some of the stuff or listening to some of the stuff I thought about USC 6 months ago, I looked like an idiot.
So but they didn't change Grinch. I get we all tried to believe it, but Grinch, Grinch is a buffoon.
We all try. All the USC fans were trying to buy in, and it didn't work out. All right, Dill, this is the main event. We went back and forth on this last night. Nebraska, Wisconsin. I'm going to give you the opening floor. I know where you're leaning. How do you differentiate? Get into the next tier. Nebraska, Wisconsin, your floor is yours.
For a guy who likes to crucify me for believing too much in true freshman quarterback, you're believing a lot in Dylan Raiola because you're basically saying he's going to come in and be a very much a gamer in the Big Ten early because if he doesn't, they didn't add a transfer quarterback. I don't think they have anything on that roster aside from the true freshman and Kalen in Dylan Raiola who have the talent to even do anything at the Big Ten level. I mean, if Dylan Raiola is good, Nebraska's looks to be in a really good spot. I love the defense. I just have more trust in Tyler Van Dyke, Phil Longo, those receivers like Will Pauling and some of the other guys. I think that unit's just got a much better chance to be good. And I love what Luke Fickell did on that defense with some of the transfer portals, like guys like Pius and the linebackers.
I can't. All right. My argument here. We saw Nebraska, Wisconsin play. It was in Madison. It went to overtime with Chubba Purdy balling out. Wisconsin edged it out. My question to you is from that game, that night, I remember exactly where I was watching it to now, what team got better from a talent standpoint? More, Nebraska or Wisconsin?
Probably slightly into Nebraska.
Yeah, that's and so starting with the quarterback conversation, I get I'm putting a ton of I don't even know how much confidence I'm putting in Dylan Raiola. It's a little bit more of the argument like he's not going to be any worse than what we saw from Nebraska in 2023. And we saw Dylan Raiola as a gamer. I mean, he was a guy that won a lot of games at Buford, Georgia as a high schooler, a guy that I think translates well to the next level, has way more arm talent than anybody in that Nebraska quarterback room last year. And on top of that, the offensive line is going to get better. They add 2 veteran receivers through the transfer portal. I mean, not only was the quarterback play bad, they were down to their 3rd running back on the depth chart, actually 4th running back in the depth chart, really. And then they were throwing to a bunch of true freshman wide receivers. So now those true freshman wide receivers are going into year 2. You bring in some veteran wide receivers through the portal, and you're getting better at the quarterback play. And then the Nebraska defense pretty much staying the same, going to be elite. That's why I have Nebraska as a riser. And again, Nebraska is a very similar team where you want to see it before you believe it. But Dill, I mean, I've already started drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm all aboard the Cornhuskers heading into 2024. that's kind of where I stand. But I'll say this to close it out. Ton of confidence in both Matt Rule and Luke Fickell.
That's the thing. You also wonder who's going to kind of win the battle between those two.
Yeah.
Really proven guys who did it at kind of, I don't want to say B tier programs, but something below the top level. Cincinnati, Baylor, they're not Wisconsin, Nebraska, that type of program. Both did a really good job there. Both have now a second year, didn't lose a ton of guys in the portal. I mean, it's interesting. How much better can each of these guys make their teams? Because again, you're right. They were razor tight last year. I don't think either team monstrously won the offseason. I think maybe Nebraska a little bit, but I think it's tight. I think you're underrating some of the defensive ads for Wisconsin.
Bringing in a 5-star quarterback in Dylan Rowe, the savior of Lincoln, Nebraska, Isaiah Nair, Jamal. I love what Nebraska did in the offseason. All right, moving on. We went 20 minutes off air the other night. We can move on. Washington coming up next. Still, Kalen
DeBoer left them in a brutal spot. At the end of the day, I love where they're going to go with Jedfish. I'm stunned he didn't get a big job in kind of that first wave of coaching hires. I thought he very much deserved it. The way he took Arizona off the mat and got them going into a kind of a really competitive team in the Big Ten. Really impressed. Like what he can do at Washington with more resources and kind of more of a historic program, if you will. But I just think they're a year out. It's really hard when you don't get that winter transfer portal window. We'll see what they do in the spring. But looking at it right now, they just don't have the depth of talent. And frankly, they weren't going to have it with Kalen DeBoer because he didn't build a program that was in any way sustainable in my mind because he refused to recruit at a reasonable level.
In 2 to 3 years, we'll be talking. What's so fun about this is you're looking at Nebraska, Wisconsin, Washington, Michigan State. All of those teams we could be talking about as outside contenders next year. I think that's what's so exciting about the Big Ten Conference. But I'm with you. When you lose 2 starting tackles, an NFL quarterback, first-round NFL quarterback, 3 NFL wide receivers, one of the top edge rushers in the country, Braylon Trice, it's hard to see what it's a reload year. I'll give you that. I think 6, 7, and 5 would be a phenomenal start to the Jetfish era. Michigan State, I'm pumped up for the Jonathan Smith era. I think that getting Aiden Childs in the portal is absolutely massive in terms of kickstarting what he can do in East Lansing. I think they did some nice things on the offensive line. I'm kind of with you. I think that coaching staff might need a year to get that development in, and they're probably another team that in 2025 I'll probably be expecting bigger things than I am in 2024.
I mean, you could convince me Michigan State could be right up there with some of those other teams in this kind of tier, if you will, because I like what they did in terms of keeping that defense intact. I mean, some really good guys, keeping them out of the portal. Really impressed with that. And you're right. At the end of the day, Jonathan Smith what he did at Oregon State and taking them up from where they were to where they got, wildly impressive. The way he develops talent, gets a team rolling, plays physical style of football. I'm kind of with you. I just don't know what you're going to get out of that offensive line. I like the coaches. I like that they brought in a new staff to work with that unit and develop it like they did at Oregon State. I just don't see how you do that in a year. And that's kind of where my hesitation to kind of throw them up in that Nebraska, Wisconsin range. That's where I kind of.
Iowa Hawkeyes, no more Big Ten West hurts them. And I'm just you make some changes on the offensive side of the football. Cade McNamara coming back. I look at that Iowa Hawkeyes roster and I say, I don't know what's totally getting me fired up outside of Caden Proctor at left tackle. And so they're going to be – Brian Ferentz is still there. They're going to be a really competitive team.
Kirk Ferentz. We're lucky.
Brian Ferentz is not there. Kirk Ferentz still there. Excuse me. I just don't know what excites me about the Iowa Hawkeyes.
I don't get how they didn't get a giant offensive coordinator. And I just when you kind of, where you're in that spot, it's like a team that could be really good if you just play decent offensive football and you go out and just do a really kind of uninspiring choice. It's not like you bring in a Phil Longo or one of those high profile guys. And I'm not saying this guy can't be good or their new offensive coordinator can't be good, but I just don't see what's going to change. You still got the personnel. You really don't have any real offensive talent that scares you. They're going to be what they've always been. Score 10 points a game, but hold teams to 9.
So going to the next one here, Maryland. You talk about no divisions. I don't know who's benefited more than Coach Locke not having to play Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State every single year. Dill, I'm really excited about this Maryland team, but I just wish they had the same roster they'd had the last couple of years. I think the biggest question is you're having to replace Talia Tungavailoa. I love Coach Locke. I think he designs really good offenses. I don't like Josh Gaddis that much. That's about where I have. When you have a question mark like that at the quarterback spot, I mean, Cameron Edge, Billy Edwards, I think they're a dark horse team. They'll be competitive, but I don't see them winning 8+ games in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and they probably are a step behind Iowa just because I'm kind of with you. Iowa's going to have one really good side of the ball. Without Talia, he's been such a staple there for so long. It feels like you just kind of wonder. And again, you kind of like what some of their quarterback play was in that bowl game, but you're going to need to see it because I did feel like they were very dependent. In Talia, like having those games that just made them better than what they were. And he threw some stinkers in for sure too. So you kind of have like highs and lows with Talia, but he'd give you a good enough play to like be competitive in games they probably didn't have any business being competitive in.
Bottom half, Minnesota, another team like Iowa, just kind of benefiting from playing in the Big Ten West. I think PJ Fleck's hit a ceiling, to be quite honest with you. And I don't know what it's going to look like not being in the Big Ten West. UCLA is an interesting one in terms of, I think that's another program that we're probably talking about maybe in a higher tier later on, but you got a lot of question marks about what that depth chart looks like.
They're a future team. They're an excitement team. I like that they pump some new blood in that. Yes. I love Eric Bieniemy. I feel like I see a lot of people being down on that hire. I love it. He was a really good recruiter at the college level when he was at Colorado and some of the other stops. I love him. I love Deshaun Foster. I love some youthful energy. That's a team that needed to get woken up. They're going to get woken up, but you're right. There's with Chip Kelly, the way they left him, not a ton of talent. Seems like it's going to be really hard to win year one.
Rutgers, I'm looking at this. I feel like I might be a little low on Rutgers. I really like what Greg Schiano is doing. I feel like I'm falling into like this, not a flashy team, but it's a damn good team. And Greg Schiano's building it the right way. That's a physical team that's going to run the football. I like Rutgers. I feel like I might be a little bit low on them. And though after Rutgers,
I think they should be above those other two for this year. And just because he's years ahead, I mean, he's kind of got something going. Rutgers will never be at the Michigan level or Ohio State. They're just not really that program. But he's gotten them where they're really competitive with everyone else. I think they should be. And I'll
tell you what, I was a big fan of Ethan Callick McManus. I just don't think PJ Fleck really let him throw the rock. Now, Greg Schiano didn't really let Gavin Wimsatt do it last year. That's the question. I think that if they get some solid quarterback play, you're looking at a very exciting team for Rutgers. They're Illinois, Indiana, Northwestern, Purdue. And again, a couple teams that with new coaches, like there's a little bit of optimism. I feel like Brett Bielema really missed out on his opportunity. I thought they had I was really high on Illinois last year. I thought they were really strong along the line of scrimmage.
It felt like that was a chance for them to build momentum, and they just didn't do it. Defense really played poorly compared to what they should have. And now it's like, oh, well, they're Illinois. You thought they had a shot to kind of bump up to that Michigan State, Iowa range.
They dropped the ball.
I don't think they seized it. I don't think they had a great offseason by any stretch of the imagination. I'm kind of like they're where they belong.
Indiana, Northwestern, Purdue. I think Purdue just get gutted. It was a team that struggled last year. It loses its two best players in Deion Burks and Nick Skirtin. It's hard. I kind of am a believer in some of these coaches. I just don't know if it's going to be in 2024. It's a loaded conference. You know what I mean? Someone's got to be in last place. Dill, that'll do it for the boys. We'll have to run this one back maybe mid-spring practice, post-spring practice, post-spring transfer portal. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas as always. Again, the support means a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.